Today, I would like to shoot one other video and talk a little bit about the past year. I started Let's Get Writing actually about three years ago when I was doing a lot of work volunteering on the Rogers TV community channel. And the idea for the show came to me, and I thought, I'll probably have a few interviews. This would be great content. I'm still going. But about this time last year, which is the point of significance I want to refer to, about this time last year, I actually had to deal with COVID and everything shut down. And I always looked forward to going into the studio every week to meet guests, to just, be in the studio environment. And I loved it. So all of a sudden that wasn't available anymore. And I thought, you know what? I've looked at some models of going live. I've done some of that. So why don't I just jump right on to Facebook and go live? So I did that. And I had a little experience with Be Live TV, and I knew that platform, and I thought, okay, I'll do it on there. So that's what I also did. And that was, as I say, a year ago. And when I sit back and I think now of all those shows I've done since then, how has it gone? What have I learned? And that's what I wanted to share today. When I started, I'm glad that I didn't really think a lot. I'm glad that I didn't get caught up in, how is this going to go? I knew I needed some lighting. I knew I needed a bit of a set or background, and I needed my computer. So that's what I went to work with. I actually really didn't have great lighting. I was using the camera in my computer, which was not great. And sound had variable quality, a lot of things like that, but it didn't stop me from going forward. And I think I learned a lot along the way with the platform. How could I make it better? Where should my eyes be? Like just so many things, a myriad of things that I would look at my shows and try to figure out, how can I fix it? I'm by no means here as an expert to say, oh yeah, I've got all this. I've got it all figured out. Oh yeah, nothing to worry about. No, it's not at all like that. I'm still learning. I still agonize over my lighting. But anyway, some of the things I did from the start, originally when I did this show, I had the computer turned around and behind me was a desk. If you go back to the earlier shows, you'll see that, or a credenza. And then I got thinking, geez, I've got this whole room and all this great light. Why am I shoving myself into a corner? So that was one of the first changes I made. And then I created a set behind me that I could use if I actually have a guest come into the I call it my studio, then that would work as well. So I did that, and I have done one interview like that. Certainly the audio is more challenging that way, so I have to work on that, because in future I may be able to have more people in here. Right now, I mainly work off of the platforms online. But I do like the background behind me. And then I even had someone work with me on how do you become the center of attention in that background. And there's different ways you do it, by the color you wear, not blending in. What necklines do you experiment with? I mean, there's so many things like that. And I've done some interviews on those topics. But what I want to talk to you about today were what were the things that were different about the process of what I was doing. So, number one, the prep work counts. When I first started doing the interviews, I knew I had a guest, and I would think about it and kind of be a little more uptight about it. And sometimes I did not know my guest very well. And even now, I may not know my guest very well, but I have put in place certain procedures. And my prep work includes always reading the books and making time for that. Very rarely do I go into an interview where I have not read the book. And that gives me confidence to make, I don't review books, but I might make a comment about the character or the feel of the book. or ask better questions, I hope, because I'm familiar with the work. And again, I feel it shows respect for my guest, and I love to read, so it's certainly no hardship. But I have read some things that I would never read, and it's really been interesting. So that's part of the prep work. The other prep work that I like to do is I put together very standard emails that tell that these emails cover what my guest needs to know. And I try to hit the highlights of what I feel will make a better show. And that is, that took a while to refine. That was a document, a living document. And even now, sometimes I tweak it, but I pretty much have it the way I want it. And I keep that on my Google Drive. And with each guest, I get that out in advance. And they have a pretty good idea of where they're coming from or where they're going to. Anyway, you get the idea. So I hope that by giving my guests that information, that there aren't any surprises, and that, there's a few tips in there for them, what to wear, about their lighting, and so on and so forth. And that's just been a good practice. So if you're doing something like this, you might want to consider that. Make sure you have some instruction for a guest on what they need to do to prepare. And then I do a little more than that. I haven't even been showing you, so read the book. I'll run through these after. Brief your guest through your email, and it brings me to the next one, which is rehearse. And that was something that I didn't do before. I would send the link out to my guest, and I would hope that they would kind of jump on time, and things would go okay. So usually they jump on 15 minutes before, but if they had any difficulty, there was a little bit of pressure. Are they going to get on? Or what if their audio wasn't good? Or what if the lighting wasn't good? So I wanted them to be more at ease having met me, and also be more comfortable with their set. So I started doing a rehearsal a couple of days before. That if there was anything they had to tweak or think about, that they could do that before the actual interview. And when they would come on to join me on the interview, they'd already done it once. And so it kind of took down some of the barriers. And I'm not sure if my guests ever feel uptight coming on the show. I have no idea how they feel. I've never actually asked them that, but I always approach it that they're going to be comfortable, because we've done a few things to make them feel comfortable and to allow them to ask any questions or anything that they want to know about. So the rehearsal part has been really helpful and really important. I think a wonderful thing to do, and not to make it stilted or like you've rehearsed. It's really just coming together, and that's been great. The other thing I like to do is plan my questions. And in order to do that, I obviously read the book. Then I go through and I do some internet research on my guest. And I may read articles, other interviews where they've been featured. I'll go to their webpage, their social media. I'll have a look at what's important to them. What are some things they've commented on, or are there statements that they've made that I can draw into the interview that will be helpful and make it more meaningful. And I try not to repeat maybe what they've done before. Or I try to take that information and package it in a way that I hope will be fresh. And I don't always ask the same 15 questions of guests. No, I don't do that. I actually try to take the individual and think, what would be a good question for them? Where are they coming from? What might we talk about that would be a little bit different? And it doesn't always have to be totally focused on books. There might be something else that is just of interest to know about them. So I have fun with that. And I try to have those questions done in advance. Some weeks it just depends, because life happens, and this is something I do because I love it, not because this is like my job. I fit this in around everything else that I do. I will try to share. I won't get rid of the word try. I will often share those questions with my guests, and there are a couple of points of view on this. Some people who interview people will never share the questions because the guest will be thinking about the answers and preparing their thoughts, and it may not be as natural or as fluid. So, there are a couple of ways of looking at that, but I've always felt if I do have the questions and any of them are not comfortable to the guest or not on point, I'll get some refreshing comments back that I can then, oh, okay, well, that's not so we'll amend that before we go to air. And it's not a big deal if you don't. I always feel that you want your interviews to be organic. So if you correct something in the interview, big deal. It's a conversation and you're learning, and that can happen. But having a little bit of advanced work on the questions and allowing the guests to see them has been okay. And I always do say, look, this is only a guide. It can change. I'm going to listen to what you say, and I may ask you things that are not here at all. So it's a guide, and that has worked well. The next thing I do is a few days in advance, I set up my platform. I make sure that, we have a system where we get the promo out and we know what the content of that is, and I do a little write-up. But coming in and make sure that my keys here on the bottom, set up the platform. I have a lot of that done in advance, of course, and then I'll also do the write-up that goes in advance for the show. Anything that I can do, prep work in that way, I have it done. And that takes kind of the anxiety of the day. It's done, it's out of the way, you get here. Because what I have since done from when I started the shows, I've started to add different things in. I can add images and photos in. So when I'm doing that, I'm the operator, I'm the interviewer, and I'm trying to do it all and not be too distracted. As a matter of fact, when I first started, I didn't even know how to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. So I ran the risk of someone calling me. I think it did happen in one or two of the interviews, but those are little things, again, you learn along the way. And shut off the notifications on your computer so there's not ding, ding, ding. My first interviews, there were ding, ding, dings everywhere. And I was not as smooth at pulling things up onto the screen. So the more you do anything, the better it goes. And also, which I did not mention earlier, I switched my camera from the one in the computer to a higher end camera. And I know that the cameras, I have a brand new MacBook Pro, which is not the one I'm using today. I have a different computer. But I found that the quality of the image, and depending on your camera, what you get behind you and how that fits. And when I'm setting up where I want to be or add a guest, I'm trying to get the angles. I'm trying to set myself in that scene. So you do have to look a bit beyond where you are, because sometimes we have a tendency only to see ourselves. So I try to look outside of that and see what's behind me. I don't always hit it. Sometimes I miss it, but I do try. And if you have a squeaky chair or different things that can come up, you want to try to have your eyes making contact with that camera, which makes it sort of weird because I can't watch the face of my guest. If I want to watch the face of my guest, I'm going to be like this through the whole interview, and I don't want to be like this. So I have to look up at my camera, and my guest is in my peripheral vision. And I do check in with them, but I really don't get to see them a lot until after. So I use a lot of voice cues to see where they might be and that sort of thing. So I can't always be looking at them. That's a little weird, but you get used to it. Then after I've done the interview, we have what I call post-production, which is a lot of work. It really is. And it's getting to be more work all the time. I'm tweaking it all the time. What can I do to improve that? Get the material out. Recently, I've started looking at the subtitles and editing those. That's only just started, so don't criticize my subtitles. I'm working my way back on that. And I look at things like I try to pull something from the interview and connect it to a blog and newsletter. So that's becoming more formalized. And how do we do more promotion? So that's going to be the big learning curve coming up over the next number of months. That's where I'm going to focus. Now that we've got the shows down and we're doing them, how are we going to let people know that we exist And what are some of those methods? So the post-production involves a lot of that. It involves uploading the shows. I pull quotes that I like that I might want to use later. I make sure that all the hashtags and any of my guests' social media and my social media, are there any credits? So again, I've developed a form for that, and you fill it in, but it still takes time. And if I do the correction to the subtitles, well, that takes time for sure. They're self-generated, but you still have to go through and make all those changes and correct them. And from there, I think I'm going to do a shorter transcript that's available for people who want to read. Some people prefer the reading over the actual show. So those are areas that I'm developing now. There's no end to it. Let me see. So that kind of brings me back to the end of how Let's Get Ready is put together and what I do and what's evolved in 1 year of working on this. And probably if I sat down and watched my own shows, which really is a good idea. And sometimes after you do the show and you've done all this, the last thing you want to do is watch it again. However, I do highly recommend that. And that's what I'm enjoying through working on the subtitles, because it's taking me back and I'm looking at the cadence of the show. I'm looking at, oh, that question sucked, or geez, you spoke over the guest here. And it's easy enough to do that. It is easy enough to do that. And how do you open the show? I try to open it more with just nothing or a second so the camera can focus in. Little things like that can help refine how you put together your production. I am open for questions. I'd love to help you. And one of the things I am putting together now is a program. And I've shared a lot of information here for sure, a lot of great tips, but I am also willing and interested in working with people one-on-one. And that's a program I am in the process of putting together, and something that I'll be able to offer to you this year. But in the meantime, if someone does want to work one-on-one, that's something that I can accommodate. We'll figure it out. No problem. And if you do have questions as you watch this video that you want to post to me, please do, and I will answer them in the comments. Only too happy to do that. We can all learn by this process. Again, thank you very much for watching this video and for your support of the shows. Let's Get Writing. So much fun. I got some great guests coming up next month too. There's something I have yet to do on my list, by the way, is advance promote my shows. And going to have to put it on that list, that checklist. Anyway, have a great day. And I look forward to hearing from you and your comments. Saying goodbye now from Central.